Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons. In this quick guitar tricks we're looking at 3 ways that you can clean up chords when using some gain. I'll start off with a kind of more overdriven AC/DC-ish sound and then go into higher gain distortions. I'll just go through them all and explain the changes that I've made as we go. For A, this will work over either major or minor. Essentially this is just one big power chord, and I might have actually taken this voicing from Paul Gilbert. What I'm doing with my little finger is barring it over that 5th fret there, and as a side note, where your little finger is will affect the intonation ever so slightly, so just watch out for that. You might need to be slightly closer to this fret, or this one, or somewhere in the middle. It's tiny things like this you might notice a lot more when recording. With B, the bass is probably taking care of this root, so it's really these 3 strings here, or add this 4th one in if you want a bit more sparkle. This will cut through in a mix pretty well, and it works for the minor too. If you just do either these 3, or again we can add in this F sharp. C, finger this just like a normal C, but make sure you mute in the A string with your middle finger. You can leave in the high E if you want to, it depends a bit on the context. Taking out this low third just kind of cleans up the sound, particularly in that low end a little bit. So this is it without, with. You might not necessarily hear it, but just feel a sort of general muddiness when it's in there. For D, consider putting in this low A, and just miss out this F sharp at the top. E, again, this will work for either the major or the minor, and I'm just getting rid of whatever third is on the G string. You may see a pattern here. So E minor, start right open, E major, start right on the 1st fret. We're getting rid of that, and we just move up to the 4th. So what you can do here is either bar your 1st finger across these 2 frets, or use your 1st and 2nd fingers. And here's that voicing. The next one we've got here is F, which isn't really an open chord, but I think it's pretty worthwhile doing. So if you take the standard F bar, just miss out the strings either side and play the 4 in the middle. And again, if the bass is playing the root, this is going to sound pretty good and add a nice bit of crunch. And finally for G, we're muting the A string, a bit like we did for C. I tend to just rest this middle finger over it here, and choke the A out that way. I'm putting the 3rd fret on the B and the E strings as well. So method 1 is pretty much just getting rid of the 3rd. If you want to keep it in, either put it in the E or the B strings. Now this sounds simple, but oddly enough, it can make quite a difference when you're recording. Okay, but that's pretty much just a bunch of power chords. I really like the major-minor sound, so what are you going to do about that? Okay, method 2, consider overdubbing or layering in dyads. So say we're going from E to G using those chord voicings we've just looked at. We can add in a new guitar track. Now if we just play the open G over the E minor, it'll sound very much like an overdub and not part of the chord. So this is why we play a small dyad, which is just 2 notes together, a bit like a power chord. I'd also try and shy away from using the open G, particularly for single notes in recordings, because this string has kind of issues with intonation and frequencies. At least with my experience of recording, it doesn't work out too well all the time when it's played particularly by itself. So let's move that note here. And because I want an E minor dyad, I'm going to play this note and this note. So if you imagine E minor chords, I'm just taking these 2. So we will play those here and here. For the G, I'm going to play this note and then this note for the 3rd. So if you think about a G bar chord, I'm just taking out the root and the major 3rd. And by itself, that guitar part would sound like this. Now say you don't like that major sound on the G, say it's a bit too happy or weak. We could just change that dyad to keep some consistency. So we could just use the root and play the 5th below. Go like this. And in context. these chords pretty hard, and I'm doing exactly the same with the dyads. I'm muting out the strings that I'm not holding down so I have some more pick attack as well. And this is just to make it sound a bit more like one part. So if you're playing one part softly, try and play the other part softly as well. If you're digging in like I am here, try and dig in both. I've also panned these examples to each side just so they stand out a little bit more for the purposes of explaining this concept. In a real life scenario, if you want to sound it like one guitar, you'd probably be better having them mixed pretty much in the same area. What's also really worthwhile considering doing is taking those dyads and putting them up the octave. So if we take that last example, we went here to here. So if we move that up the octave, we get here to here. And with the first one, we could do this. Now you might have noticed what I've done there is kept all the notes on the same strings. And I've done this because it kind of helps keep a more consistent timbre for the part. Okay, now I'll keep the main rhythm part in the middle, and I'll move both of those new parts either side. First off, there'll be no thirds at all. Then I'll do one with thirds, and then playing the thirds with one guitar and not the other, and then flip them around so one's doing the thirds and the other one isn't. Just so you can hear how all these kind of subtle changes can really affect the mood of a riff or song. Finally, you could try using octaves to fill out the chord. If we've got a really big lush voicing like this one, and this, and we have even more gain, what you could do is layer the third in octaves. So we could put the one for E minor here, being a G octave, and over G, B would be the third, so we could play that here. The other thing we could do is we could put these octaves up the octave. So we could find this G here that we play over the E minor, and then we can move up to this B here for the G major. You can use this with much more complex intervals as well. I'm just sticking to the basics for this video to keep it snappy and to the point. But more like modern metal bands like Periphery, I wouldn't be surprised if they use tricks like these when they're adding in the more kind of interesting 9s and 11s and those sorts of notes. In this last example coming up, the first run through will be doing octaves in the lower thirds, the second in the higher thirds, and then what I'll do is have both thirds together, again just so you can hear the differences between these. So those were a few ways in which you can clean up big chords when using overdrive and or distortion. This has been Quick Tricks, that's the playlist up there. Please do consider to subscribe, check out some other videos I've done, leave a comment if you've got any questions or indeed suggestions, like, share and enable notifications with that little bell on the side if you feel so inclined. Cheers guys.